The 1,000-year galactic peace shatters aliens, dread humans, but they only laugh. Before they finish observing us, subscribe if you believe instinct can't be programmed. Enjoy the story. The Galactic Alliance station hung in space like a crystalline dream, its bioluminescent walls pulsing with alien rhythms. For 1,000 years, peace had reigned among the stars. Species who had once warred now debated trade agreements with passionate civility. Then humanity arrived. Ambassador David Carter stepped through the airlock carrying coffee, what the Alliance database labeled voluntary mild poisoning for stimulant purposes. His smile was warm, his eyes sharp, and every alien delegate instinctively stepped aside. "Good morning, everyone," Carter called out cheerfully. "Beautiful day to prevent an interstellar war, don't you think?" High Commissioner Tazara, her crystalline form refracting irritated light patterns, turned to Secretary Veleth. 3 years of their optimism. Veleth's gelatinous mass rippled. "The humans do bring energy to our proceedings." "Energy," Tazara repeated darkly. "Is that what we're calling it?" Inside the assembly hall, 300 species gathered for the morning session. Carter took his seat in the diplomatically termed Emerging Voices section, more commonly known as the Newcomers' Corner. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," announced the moderator. Carter stood coffee in hand. "Thank you. Earth submits our proposal for expanded humanitarian escort services in contested regions." A collective sigh rippled through the assembly. Humanitarian missions were noble but hardly serious galactic politics. Representative Eskren of the Ophidian Collective flicked his forked tongue dismissively. "The humans wish to play rescuer again. How quaint." Carter's smile never wavered. "We prefer preventive diplomacy. It's easier to stop a fire than rebuild what it destroys." Marshal Korath ruffled his feathers patronizingly. "The humans speak of fire prevention while drinking poison. Their logic is unique." "Coffee isn't poison, Marshal," Carter replied, taking another sip. "Though I suppose when you've evolved from apex aerial predators, anything that doesn't involve swooping down on prey seems strange." The comment hung like a challenge wrapped in politeness. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Humans had this habit of making technically accurate observations that somehow felt dangerous. What they didn't know was that 3 levels below Carter's assistant, Tina Morales, was coordinating with operatives across 12 systems. "Package Alpha is in position," she whispered into encrypted comm. "The professor is about to begin his lecture." The tension in the Alliance's diplomatic lounge could have been cut with a molecular blade. Representatives from influential species gathered for what was officially cultural exchange, but everyone understood as discussing the human problem away from official channels. "They cannot be seated near the Centauran delegation at the Harmony Gala," Skren was saying, scales shifting with agitation. "Their pheromones are offensive to refined sensibilities." "It's not just the pheromones," added Counselor Vextar, skin rippling purple. "They laugh loudly at inappropriate moments." During the meditation of galactic serenity, they made jokes about ceremonial silence. Tazara's crystalline form dimmed. "The humans are persistently cheerful. It's unsettling. Species that survived genuine hardship show proper respect for suffering. These humans act as though existence is amusing." Marshal Korath preened his feathers. "Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. Instead of viewing them as equals, we should consider their true position. They've been spacefaring for decades. By galactic standards, they're children playing at diplomacy." "Dangerous children," muttered Vextar. "Have you reviewed their military expansion rate? They've established defensive positions in 17 systems in 2 years." "Defensive positions," Skren scoffed. "That's what they call them. But I've seen the specifications. Those escort vessels carry enough firepower to glass a small moon." The conversation was interrupted by the soft chime indicating an incoming message. Tazara activated her personal display and her crystalline form blazed with sudden alarm. "What is it?" asked Korath. "A message from the Alliance Security Council." Tazara's voice carried harmonics of confusion. "They're requesting an emergency session. Priority Alpha. The subject line is unusual." "What does it say?" Skren demanded. Tazara's light patterns shifted to something none of them had seen before. "It says, 'The humans want to play show and tell.'" Meanwhile, in his modest quarters, Ambassador Carter was reviewing intelligence reports while his coffee grew cold. Tina Morales sat across from him, her expression troubled. "David, are you sure about this approach? We're going to burn every bridge we've built." Carter looked up from a holographic display showing shipping manifest financial transfers and surveillance footage. "Tina, we never built bridges. We built camouflage. There's a difference. The other species are already suspicious. If we reveal what we actually know, they'll realize they should have been suspicious all along." Carter interrupted. "The Xarion crime syndicate has been operating under their noses for 20 years. 20 years, Tina, and not one of their vaunted security agencies noticed the pattern." He gestured to the data floating between them. Weapons trafficking, slave trading, technology theft, and it's all happening with the implicit cooperation of at least 6 council members. The galaxy's finest investigators couldn't find water on an ocean world. Tina's expression softened with concern. "And you think embarrassing them publicly is the best approach?" Carter's smile was razor sharp. "I think showing them exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop pretending to be harmless is the only approach that will work." He stood, straightening his tie. "Besides, they think we're just loud children with basic survival skills. Let's show them what happens when children grow up." "The emergency session is in 20 minutes, Tina reminded him. "Perfect timing," Carter replied, gathering his materials. "The Xarians should be making their move right about now." As if summoned by his words, the station's emergency alert system activated, bathing the corridors in pulsing red light. The Alliance Security Council chamber inspired confidence. Burnished metal walls, peaceful star charts, seating arranged for equality. Today, it felt like a trap. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored non-binary entities," Carter began, "I come with information that will fundamentally change how we view galactic security." Tazara's crystalline form pulsed impatiently. "Ambassador Carter, while we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, perhaps this matter would suit the appropriate subcommittees better." "I think the full council needs to hear this," Carter replied, activating his holographic presentation. "Especially considering the scope of the threat." What followed was methodical destruction. Financial records showing systematic corruption. Shipping manifest documenting illegal weapons transfers. Surveillance footage of Alliance officials meeting with criminals. And, at the center, Xarion. The Xarion crime syndicate has operated with impunity for 2 decades, Carter explained as evidence filled the air. They've trafficked weapons, sentient beings, and prohibited future tech. Their operations span 47 systems, profits exceeding 12 member worlds' GDP. Marshal Korath's feathers had gone completely flat, a sign of extreme distress in Valter physiology. These allegations are extraordinary. How did human intelligence services acquire this information when your own security apparatus failed to notice it?" Carter's smile was sharp. "That's an excellent question, Marshal." Skren's scales had shifted to a mottled pattern of fear and rage. "You conducted unauthorized operations across sovereign territories. This is a violation of—" The sentence was cut off by the station's emergency alert system. Red lights strobed across the chamber as the AI announced, "Alert unknown vessels approaching. Weapons signatures detected. All personnel to emergency stations." Carter touched his ear, activating a communication device none of the aliens had noticed. "Vigilant, this is Ambassador. Situation, Alpha. You are weapons-free." The council stared at him in confusion as the tactical display showed 12 unmarked vessels bearing down on the station. Their design was a hybrid of technologies from multiple species, exactly the sort of cobbled-together but lethal craft favored by those operating outside legal boundaries. "What are you doing?" Tazara demanded. "Ending this conversation," Carter replied calmly. "Display tactical feed." The holographic projector flickered to life, showing the approaching hostile vessels. The station's defensive systems were responding, but slowly, their command protocols apparently compromised. "How is this possible?" Korath whispered. "The defensive grid is isolated from all external networks." "Obviously not isolated enough," Carter observed. Then into his communicator. "All units execute Protocol 7. Boarding teams prepare for live capture operations." The tactical display flashed as 6 new ships suddenly appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel with impossible precision. Their design was unmistakably human, sleek, predatory, and moving with coordinated lethality that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. "May I introduce the 7th Rapid Response Fleet?" Carter said conversationally. "They've been standing by for this exact scenario." The Council watched in stunned silence as the human vessels executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional tactics. They moved like a pack of hunters, herding the attacking ships into a perfect killing field. "You anticipated this attack?" Tazara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Of course we did," Carter replied. "We leaked information about our investigation specifically to provoke this response. It's much easier to capture criminals in the act than to build a case that satisfies the Alliance's judicial requirements." On the display, the human ships launched what appeared to be boarding pods that attached to enemy hulls like metallic parasites. What happened next was swift, efficient, and thoroughly professional. "Those are our Marines," Carter explained as tactical feeds showed armored figures moving through enemy corridors with predatory grace. "They specialize in close-quarters combat. The term dates back to when humans fought wars on water, if you can imagine something so primitive." Within minutes, all 12 hostile vessels had been neutralized. The human boarding teams had secured command centers, disabled weapon systems, and taken prisoners with minimal casualties on either side. "Status report," Carter requested. The response crackled through the chamber's speakers. "All hostile vessels contained Ambassador. Prisoners secured command systems, captured data extraction in progress. Orders: maintain position and prepare for Alliance security handover," Carter replied. Then, turning back to the shell-shocked Council, he smiled. "As I was saying, Earth stands ready to assist in bringing these criminals to justice." The silence that followed was profound. The galaxy had just witnessed something that challenged every assumption they had made about humanity. These weren't bumbling newcomers stumbling through diplomacy. These were apex predators who had orchestrated the entire scenario from the beginning. Secretary Veleth's gelatinous form rippled with what might have been terror or admiration. You planned all of this." "We planned for all contingencies," Carter corrected. "That's what survival skills teach you: hope for the best. Prepare for the worst and always have an exit strategy." Marshal Korath found his voice first. "Ambassador, your actions, while apparently in defense of the Alliance, represent a massive breach of protocol. Military operations must be authorized by this Council." Carter turned to face the vaulter marshal, and something in his gaze caused the mighty warrior to take an involuntary step backward. "Marshal, when someone points a gun at your head, protocol becomes a luxury we can't afford. We acted to save lives." His smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Isn't that what matters most?" In the aftermath of the Xarion raid, the Alliance Security Council found itself in uncharted territory. Emergency sessions had been called. Threat assessments were being hastily revised. And through it all, the human delegation maintained an air of helpful cooperation that somehow managed to be more unsettling than outright hostility. "The intelligence we've gathered indicates that Xarion's operations go far deeper than we initially suspected. Carter was saying his presentation, filling the chamber with damning evidence. They've infiltrated supply chains, compromised communication networks, and established sleeper cells in key alliance facilities. Tazara's crystalline form had remained dim throughout the briefing. Ambassador, while we appreciate this intelligence windfall, the methods by which it was obtained remain deeply concerning. As concerning as 20 years of Alliance security failures? Carter asked mildly. The question hit like a physical blow. Korath's feathers ruffled in agitation. We couldn't have known. You could have... Tina Morales interrupted, speaking for the first time during the formal session. The young intelligence officer had been silent until now, but her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. The patterns were all there. Financial anomalies, shipping irregularities, communication dead zones that corresponded perfectly with criminal activity. She stood her movements precise, despite the obvious tension in the room. I spent 18 months infiltrating Xarion's network. Do you know what I found? The council waited. That they weren't hiding? Tina continued, her voice growing stronger. They were operating in plain sight because they knew no one was looking. They had become so comfortable with Alliance complacency that they stopped taking basic precautions. Skren's scales had shifted to patterns of defensive anger. You conducted unauthorized infiltration operations. I volunteered for them. Tina cut him off. Because someone had to do something about a criminal enterprise that was trafficking sentient beings while the Alliance held committee meetings about protocol violations. Carter placed a gentle hand on his aide's shoulder. Tina, perhaps, no, David. She shrugged off his touch, her eyes blazing with conviction. They need to hear this, all of it. She activated her own holographic display, and the chamber filled with surveillance footage, communication intercepts, and personnel records. Xarion wasn't just a crime syndicate. It was a testing ground. They were evaluating Alliance response times, security protocols, and corruption susceptibility. The images showed Alliance officials accepting bribes, security forces deliberately failing to investigate suspicious activities, and bureaucrats actively blocking investigations that might have exposed the network. Testing ground for what, Tazara's voice was barely audible. For something bigger, Tina replied. This was never about profit. This was about proving that the Alliance could be manipulated, compromised, and ultimately controlled by anyone with sufficient patience and resources. She gestured to the final series of documents. Xarion wasn't working alone. They were the advance guard for a larger organization that views the Alliance not as a partner, but as a target. The chamber erupted in overlapping vocalizations, electromagnetic pulses, and pheromone releases, the multi-species equivalent of panicked shouting. Order, order. The session moderator struggled to regain control. The chair will recognize speakers in sequence. The chair will recognize this. Carter interrupted his voice, cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, optical sensor, and electromagnetic receptor focused on the human ambassador. 3 hours ago, we received confirmation that Xarion himself is en route to this station, Carter announced. He's bringing a fleet of 30 vessels and plans to extract his captured operatives while demonstrating Alliance vulnerability to his superiors. Tazara's form blazed with sudden light. You've turned us into a target. No, Carter replied calmly. We've turned this into an opportunity, but it will require the Alliance to make a choice. What kind of choice? Korath demanded. Carter's expression softened, and for the first time since the crisis began, he looked genuinely human, tired, concerned, and carrying the weight of impossible decisions. The choice between safety and justice, between protocol and results, between the Alliance you've been and the Alliance you need to become. He gestured to the tactical display. Xarion will be here in 6 hours. His fleet outguns the station's defenses by a factor of 3. Traditional Alliance response doctrine calls for negotiation, de-escalation, and diplomatic resolution. And you're suggesting, Sekren hissed. I'm suggesting that some problems can't be negotiated away, Carter replied. Xarion didn't build his organization by respecting diplomatic immunity. He won't be stopped by harsh language and economic sanctions. Tina stepped forward. The human fleet is prepared to engage, but we need alliance approval for offensive operations in alliance space. You're asking us to authorize a war, Tazara said flatly. We're asking you to authorize justice, Carter corrected. The question is whether you trust us to deliver it. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Marshal Korath spoke. If we agree to this, what assurances do we have that humanity won't simply replace Xarion as the dominant threat to Alliance security? Carter looked the Valter Marshal directly in the eyes. You have our word that we're here to protect what we all built together. But Marshal, if you can't trust us after what we've shown you, he shrugged. Then maybe the Alliance deserves whatever Xarion has planned. The vote when it came was closer than anyone expected, 7 in favor, 5 opposed, 3 abstentions. Barely enough to authorize the operation, but enough. As the Council dispersed to prepare for what might be the Alliance's final battle, Tina remained behind with Carter. You didn't tell them about the other fleets, she observed quietly. They weren't ready to hear about the other fleets, Carter replied. One revelation at a time, Tina. That's how you train a species to think like survivors instead of committee members. The next 6 hours passed with the peculiar mixture of frantic preparation and forced calm that preceded all major confrontations. Throughout the Alliance station, emergency protocols activated systems that hadn't been used in decades. Shield generators hummed to life. Weapons batteries emerged from concealed housing. And in secure communication centers across 36 star systems, humanity's hidden assets received their final orders. Tazara found herself in the observation deck, watching human personnel coordinate with Alliance security forces. The efficiency was unsettling. These weren't the bumbling newcomers she had dismissed for 3 years. These were professionals who moved with the practiced grace of predators, preparing for a hunt. Remarkable, isn't it? Secretary Veleth had approached, silently, their gelatinous form rippling with subtle bioluminescence. What's remarkable? Tazara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. How completely we misunderstood them. Veleth's mass shifted toward the activity below. We saw their enthusiasm for humanitarian missions and assumed weakness. We heard their laughter during serious discussions and assumed immaturity. We watched them defer to our experience and assumed incompetence. Tazara's crystalline structure dimmed. And all the while they were cataloging our failures, mapping our blind spots, and positioning themselves to fix problems we didn't even know we had. The question, Veleth continued, is whether we're witnessing salvation or conquest. Before Tazara could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life. All personnel, this is Alliance Command. Incoming vessels detected at the system perimeter. Configuration matches projected Xarion fleet composition. Estimated arrival, 47 minutes. In the command center, Carter stood before a holographic display that showed the tactical situation with startling clarity. Xarion's 30 ships were approaching in a formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming confidence. They weren't sneaking in. They were announcing their presence like a conquering army. He's not even trying to hide his intentions, Tina observed. Look at that formation. It's designed for maximum psychological impact. Carter nodded. Xarion wants the Alliance to see exactly how helpless they are against organized opposition. This isn't just a rescue mission, it's a demonstration. Marshal Korath approached his usual marshal bearing, somewhat diminished by recent revelations. Ambassador, our defensive coordinators are requesting human tactical assessment. They're unfamiliar with engagement protocols against numerically superior forces. That's because the Alliance hasn't fought a real war in 1,000 years, Carter replied without taking his eyes off the display. Your people are excellent at peacekeeping and conflict resolution. But when someone decides they don't want peace, he shrugged. Different skill set required. And humanity possesses this different skill set. Carter's smile was grim. Martial humanity spent most of its evolutionary history as both predator and prey. We learned to fight because the alternative was extinction. Your species learned to cooperate because they were already apex predators. There's a difference. On the tactical display, new contacts suddenly appeared, dozens of them, emerging from positions throughout the system. The signatures were unmistakably human, but the numbers were staggering. Ambassador Skren's voice carried notes of accusation and fear. How many ships do humans actually possess? Enough? Carter replied simply. The real question is whether you're ready to see what happens when we stop pretending that overwhelming force isn't sometimes the answer to difficult problems. The Xarion fleet had reached the outer system and was transmitting on all Alliance frequencies. The message was simple surrender. The station and all personnel would be spared. Resist, and there would be no survivors. Traditional Alliance protocol calls for opening negotiations, Tazara announced formally. Traditional Alliance protocol, Carter replied, is why Xarion felt confident enough to make this demand in the first place. He activated his communicator. All human vessels, this is Alliance command. You are authorized for active engagement under Article 47 of the Mutual Defense Charter. Rules of engagement are weapons-free with priority on prisoner capture. Execute Operation Shepherd's Crook. What followed was unlike anything in the Alliance's recorded military history. The human vessels didn't simply engage the Xarion fleet, they surrounded it, herded it, and systematically dismantled its offensive capability with surgical precision. They're not trying to destroy the enemy ships, Korath observed with professional admiration. They're capturing them intact. Complete intelligence recovery, Tina explained. Every ship we take means more information about the larger organization behind Xarion. On the primary display, they watched as human boarding teams secured enemy vessels one by one. The operations were swift, efficient, and executed with a level of coordination that spoke of extensive training and experience. Where did they learn these tactics? Skren whispered. From fighting each other. Carter replied matter-of-factly, humans have been perfecting the art of warfare for millennia. We only stopped fighting ourselves when we realized we had a galaxy full of new challenges to face together. The battle, if it could be called, that lasted less than 2 hours. When it was over, 28 of Xarion's 30 ships had been captured intact, their crews taken prisoner, and their command structures completely compromised. Status report, Carter requested. All objectives achieved, Ambassador. Xarion himself has been secured and is requesting negotiations. Carter's laugh was genuinely amused. Of course he is. Transfer him to Alliance custody. I believe our friends here have some questions for him. As the immediate crisis passed, Tazara approached Carter with something approaching respect. Ambassador, I believe I owe you an apology. For what? For underestimating what humanity brings to the Alliance. You're not just enthusiastic newcomers, you're... She paused, searching for the right words. Apex predators who prefer diplomacy, but never forgot how to hunt. Carter supplied helpfully. Indeed. Tazara's crystalline form brightened. The Alliance has been fortunate in its friends. The interrogation chamber had been designed for comfort rather than intimidation. Soft lighting, ergonomic seating, and neural dampening fields that prevented aggressive species from overwhelming their interrogators with pheromones or psychic pressure. It was a testament to the Alliance's commitment to civilized justice. Xarion found it amusing. Comfortable accommodations, he observed as Carter entered the chamber. The criminal mastermind was a Drachnor, a species known for their tactical intelligence and absolute lack of empathy. Though I suspect comfort isn't your primary concern. Actually, it is, Carter replied, taking the seat across from him. Comfortable prisoners are cooperative prisoners. and cooperation is what we need from you." "Cooperation?" Xarion's laugh was like broken glass. "Human, you've destroyed 2 decades of careful planning and eliminated the most profitable criminal enterprise in galactic history. Why would I cooperate with you?" Carter activated a holographic display between them. Images of Xarion's captured fleet, imprisoned crews, and seized assets filled the air. "Because we have all of this, and you have nothing left to lose by talking." "I have my pride." "Pride doesn't feed your family or protect your species from the larger organization you were working for," Carter observed. "And yes, we know about them. Your operation was too sophisticated, too well-funded, and too coordinated to be independent." Xarion's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his composure. "You know nothing. We know you were testing Alliance response capabilities. We know you were mapping corruption networks within member governments. We know you were preparing for something much larger than criminal enterprise." Carter leaned forward. "What we don't know is whether you were a willing participant or just another tool being used by beings who saw you as expendable." "I am no one's tool," Xarion snarled. "Prove it," Carter challenged. "Tell us about the synthesis." The name hit Xarion like a physical blow. His confident facade crumbled, replaced by something approaching fear. "How do you— That name is classified beyond your clearance level." "Our clearance level," Carter corrected gently, "is apparently much higher than you assumed." In the adjacent observation chamber, the Alliance Council watched the interrogation with growing unease. The casual way Carter had revealed knowledge of this synthesis suggested intelligence capabilities far beyond what humanity had previously demonstrated. "How long have they known?" Tazara whispered to Velith. "More importantly," Velith replied, "what else do they know that we don't?" On screen, Carter was displaying new information, organizational charts, financial networks, and strategic assessments that painted a picture of a conspiracy spanning multiple sectors of the galaxy. The synthesis, Carter explained to Xarion, is an extragalactic organization that views our local cluster as suitable for resource extraction and population management. They sent advanced teams to evaluate indigenous resistance capabilities and identify the most efficient conquest strategies. Xarion remained silent, but his body language confirmed the accuracy of Carter's statements. "Your criminal network was never about profit," Carter continued. "It was about stress-testing Alliance defenses and identifying key weaknesses. The trafficking, the corruption, the systematic undermining of security protocols, all of it was preparation for full-scale invasion." "And if that's true," Xarion finally spoke, "what difference does it make you've seen my fleet human? 30 ships, and you barely managed to capture them intact. The synthesis will send 1,000 times that number." Carter's smile was cold. "Xarion, you've made the same mistake the Alliance made. You assumed that what you saw was everything we had." He activated a new display in the chamber filled with tactical data that made Xarion's face go pale. Fleet compositions, defensive installations, manufacturing capabilities, research projects that defied conventional understanding of future tech limitations. "Humanity didn't join the Alliance as refugees seeking protection," Carter explained. "We joined as guardians, positioning ourselves to protect something worth preserving. Every humanitarian mission, every diplomatic gesture, every moment of apparent weakness, it was all preparation for this moment." "Impossible," Xarion breathed. "No species could conceal capabilities of this magnitude." "No species that thinks like prey," Carter corrected, "but predators. Predators excel at camouflage, at misdirection, at appearing harmless until the moment they strike." In the observation chamber, Skren's scales had shifted to patterns of pure terror. He's describing a species-wide deception spanning decades. How is that possible? Marshal Korath's feathers lay flat against his body. It would require coordination, planning, and discipline on a scale we've never witnessed. But more than that, It would require a fundamental understanding of psychology that treats other intelligent species as subjects for manipulation. As prey, Tizara said quietly. Back in the interrogation chamber, Carter was revealing the scope of humanity's true preparations. We've established defensive installations in 43 systems. We've developed future tech that makes your sponsor's equipment obsolete. We've cultivated survival skills that turn every human civilian into a potential resistance fighter. He stood, his casual demeanor falling away like a discarded mask. And we've done all of this while convincing all of you that we were harmless newcomers, grateful for acceptance into galactic civilization. "What are you?" Xarion whispered. Carter's smile returned, but now it carried edges that made the Drachnor instinctively recoil. "We're what evolution produces when a species spends millions of years learning to survive on a world that actively tries to kill everything living on it. We're what happens when apex predators develop intelligence, cooperation, and the wisdom to prefer peace while never forgetting how to wage war." He leaned down, bringing his face level with Xarion's. "We're humanity, and the synthesis is about to learn why that should terrify them." The quincentennial Harmony Gala proceeded as scheduled, though the events of the preceding weeks had fundamentally altered its significance. What had once been a celebration of galactic cooperation had become something else entirely, a recognition that the Alliance had survived its greatest test, not through its own strength but through the intervention of species they had never truly understood. The human delegation, once relegated to the newcomers section, now occupied a place of honor near the central dais. Ambassador Carter stood among representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, no longer the affable outsider seeking acceptance, but revealed as something far more complex and dangerous. "Remarkable transformation," Marshal Korath observed to Tizara as they watched Carter engage in animated conversation with the Arcturian mediator. "3 weeks ago, I viewed him as an enthusiastic amateur. Today, you recognize him as a predator who chose to wear diplomatic camouflage." Tizara finished. Her crystalline form had remained dimmed since the revelations began a sign of deep contemplation in her species. "The question is whether we should feel grateful or terrified." Secretary Veleth rippled with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps both. Gratitude that they chose to protect us, terror at what they're capable of when protection requires violence." The gala's central ceremony honored those who had contributed to galactic security during the recent crisis. When Carter's name was announced, the applause was respectful but subdued. The assembled delegates were still processing what they had learned about humanity's true nature. Carter approached the podium with his characteristic easy grace, but the assembled dignitaries now recognized the predatory awareness that had always lurked beneath his diplomatic courtesy. "Friends, colleagues, fellow travelers in this vast galaxy," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the grand hall. "3 weeks ago, you knew humanity as enthusiastic newcomers, eager to contribute but limited in our capabilities. Today, you know us as something rather different." A ripple of nervous movement passed through the audience. "I want to address the question that I know weighs on many minds: what are humanity's true intentions? Why did we conceal our capabilities? Why did we allow ourselves to be underestimated and, in some cases, dismissed?" He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. "The answer lies in understanding what survival skills actually teach. They don't just teach you how to endure hardship, they teach you how to evaluate threats, how to prepare for worst-case scenarios, and how to distinguish between those who can be trusted and those who cannot." Tizara felt a chill despite the warm atmosphere of the gala. Carter was explaining their deception, but his words carried implications that extended far beyond mere military strategy. When humanity first encountered galactic civilization, Carter continued, we faced a choice. We could announce ourselves as the apex predators we had evolved, to be leveraging our capabilities to secure immediate advantages. Or we could take time to understand who our neighbors truly were, what they valued, and whether they were worth protecting. Skren's scales rippled with patterns of deep unease. The human was describing a multi-decade evaluation process in which the entire alliance had been unknowingly tested. For 37 years, we watched how you handled crises. We observed your responses to threat and opportunity. We studied your moral frameworks, your decision-making processes, and your commitment to the principles you claimed to cherish. Carter smiled, and for the first time since the revelations began, it reached his eyes, and we concluded that galactic civilization, despite its flaws, was worth preserving. That the Alliance, despite its bureaucratic inefficiencies and occasional moral compromises, represented something precious, the possibility of different species choosing cooperation over domination. The tension in the hall began to ease slightly, though wariness remained. But preservation requires protection, and protection sometimes requires capabilities that civilized beings prefer not to acknowledge. Humanity evolved on a world where everything wanted to kill us. We learned to be dangerous not because we enjoyed violence, but because the alternative was extinction. He gestured toward the great viewing windows where stars shone peacefully in the cosmic dark. Out there, beyond our borders, beings like Xarion and organizations like the Synthesis view our prosperity as weakness to be exploited. They see our diversity as division to be encouraged. They interpret our preference for diplomatic solutions as inability to pursue military ones. They are, Carter said with quiet intensity, catastrophically wrong. Tina Morales, seated with the human diplomatic staff, felt a surge of pride at her mentor's words. This was the Carter she knew. The strategist who thought in decades, the protector who prepared for threats others couldn't imagine. The diplomat who understood that peace required strength. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Carter continued. We want to protect it. We don't seek to replace your institutions with our own. We seek to strengthen them against those who would destroy them. We don't ask you to become like us. We ask only that you remember what we've shown you when the next crisis comes. He stepped back from the podium, then paused, as if remembering something important. There's an old human saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." For 37 years, we've been speaking very softly indeed. Recent events have revealed the size of our stick. His smile turned predatory. The question now is whether our enemies will be wise enough to listen to the soft words, or whether they'll force us to use the stick. The applause that followed was thunderous, carrying notes of relief, admiration, and healthy respect. As Carter returned to his seat, Tazara approached him. "Ambassador, I have a question that has been troubling me since your revelations began." "Of course, Commissioner. Your species has revealed capabilities that dwarf those of any other Alliance member. Your strategic thinking operates on timescales that make our longest-term planning look reactive. Your understanding of threats and opportunities appears to extend far beyond anything we had imagined." Tazara paused. "Why do you still need us?" Carter's expression softened with genuine affection. "Because power without moral guidance becomes tyranny, and wisdom without diverse perspectives becomes blindness. Humanity learned to survive, but survival isn't the same as living. We need you to remind us that strength serves a purpose beyond itself." He gestured toward the gala's diverse attendees. "Every species here contributes something unique to galactic civilization. Your crystalline forms process information in ways that reveal patterns we miss. The Velith collective consciousness sees connections across vast networks. Korath's people understand honor in ways that keep us grounded in principle. And the Ophidians," Tazara asked, glancing toward Skren. "Even the Ophidians," Carter confirmed. "Their paranoia keeps us honest about our own motivations. If Skren hadn't been suspicious of our humanitarian missions, we might have grown complacent in our deception." Tazara's crystalline form brightened slightly. "You orchestrated his suspicion to test your own operational security." "We orchestrated nothing," Carter corrected. We simply ensured that our actions would generate the responses that revealed truth. Skren's suspicion was genuine, and it served its purpose perfectly. As the gala continued around them, Tazara found herself looking at the human delegation with new understanding. These weren't conquerors disguised as diplomats. They were protectors who had learned to appear harmless while positioning themselves to defend what they valued. The distinction, she realized, was everything. 6 months after the Xarion incident, the Alliance had settled into what historians would later term the new equilibrium. Security protocols had been overhauled. Intelligence sharing between species had increased dramatically, and humanity, no longer concealing its true nature, had been formally recognized as the Alliance's primary guardian species. Ambassador Carter stood in his office reviewing reports from across the galaxy. Xarion's information had proven invaluable in identifying and dismantling 3 other criminal networks. The captured synthesis operatives had revealed staging areas' supply chains and strategic objectives that allowed Alliance forces to disrupt invasion preparations before they could fully develop. But it was the report on his desk that held his complete attention. Long-range sensor arrays have detected anomalous signatures at the galactic rim. Tina reported, her expression grim. The patterns match theoretical models for synthesis scout ships, but the technology signatures are different. Different how? Carter asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. More advanced. The future tech we're seeing suggests they've been upgrading their capabilities based on our tactical performance against Xarion's forces. Carter nodded slowly. This was always the risk of revealing one's capabilities. Intelligent enemies learned from the demonstration. How long before they're ready to mount a serious offensive? Conservative estimate, 18 months. Optimistic estimate, they're already moving into position for preliminary strikes. Through his office window, Carter could see the Alliance station bustling with activity. Humans now worked openly alongside their alien colleagues, their survival skills and strategic thinking integrated into every aspect of galactic defense. The deception was over, but the protection it had enabled was just beginning. Tina, initiate Protocol Omega. It's time to contact the other colonies. Other colonies. Tina's eyes widened. David, the Alliance barely processed learning about our primary defensive capabilities. If we reveal that humanity has established settlements throughout the local group, then they'll understand that we've been preparing for threats beyond their current comprehension, Carter finished. The synthesis isn't just planning to invade this galaxy, Tina. They're planning to use it as a staging ground for expansion into neighboring galaxies. He activated his secure communicator using encryption protocols that had never been shared with Alliance intelligence services. This is Shepard to all flock leaders. The wolves have found us. Time to remind them why sheep developed such effective guardian dogs. The responses came from across the galaxy and beyond human settlements, in places the Alliance had never imagined, with capabilities that made their recent revelations look modest by comparison. Sir, Tina asked quietly, when this is over, when we've dealt with the synthesis and any other threats that follow them, what then? What does humanity become when the galaxy no longer needs guardians? Carter smiled, and for the first time in months, it was entirely peaceful. Then we become what we've always wanted to be, Tina. We become explorers, scientists, artists, and dreamers. We become the species that asks, what's over the next hill, instead of what wants to kill us today? He looked out at the stars where new threats were gathering, but also where infinite possibilities waited. But until that day comes, we remain what we've always been, the species that stands between our friends and those who would destroy them. In the depths of space beyond the reach of Alliance sensors, something vast stirred in the darkness. The synthesis had received reports of their advance force's failure, and their response was already taking shape. Ships beyond numbering began their journey toward a galaxy they had marked for conquest. They would learn, as Xarion had learned, as countless other threats had learned throughout human history, that some prey was far more dangerous than it appeared. The 1,000-year peace was ending, but what would rise from its ashes might be something even better. A civilization that had learned to survive anything the universe could throw at it, protected by guardians who had spent millennia perfecting the art of turning the impossible into the inevitable. In his office, Carter closed the threat assessment files and opened another document plans for the next phase of Alliance expansion proposals for new diplomatic initiatives and dreams of exploration that extended far beyond the current crisis. Because that was what humans did. They planned for peace while preparing for war, hoped for the best while training for the worst, and never stopped believing that tomorrow could be better than today. The galaxy was about to learn that this philosophy, backed by the strength to enforce it, was the most dangerous force in the universe. The story continues beyond these stars, beyond these threats, into possibilities we can barely imagine. But remember this, in a universe full of predators, sometimes the greatest protection comes from those who learn to hunt in defense of what they love. These are the HFI stories that remind us that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about choosing what's worth protecting and having the strength to protect it. What will you choose to protect?